September 12, 2025, 12:25 a.m. The Baltic night was cold and silent over the Primorsk oil port. Two enormous tankers, Captain Loeb and Sergei Gorshkov, stood waiting, their bellies ready to fill with millions of barrels of crude oil bound for the Shadow Fleet. But hundreds of kilometers away, deep inside southern Russia, a quiet alarm began to hum. On the radar screens of a Nebo M long-range VHF station, strange signals appeared. 70 faint echoes, each moving fast and low, their radar signatures barely visible.
Moments later, confirmation came from the 91N6E Big Bird surveillance radar. Multiple unidentified contacts, low altitude, inbound from the southwest. Russian operators froze. Then came the sirens. The sky over Leningrad Oblast was about to ignite. The blueprint of deception.
The roots of this attack lay months earlier in a dimly lit room in Kiev, where Ukrainian planners faced a cruel equation: to hit a target 1,000 kilometers deep inside Russia through the densest A2-AD air defense bubble on Earth. To succeed, they would have to turn Russian strength against itself. The solution was as elegant as it was deadly: a grand deception. Ukraine would flood Russia's skies with decoys, cheap, disposable, and fast, forcing Russian radars to chase ghosts while the real killers slipped through the cracks.
When the first radar blips appeared that night, Russian generals felt no panic. This was exactly what their S-400s were built for. Across St. Petersburg and Leningrad Oblast, missile batteries came alive. Gravestone engagement radars locked on targets. Pantsir S-1s unleashed barrages of 30mm cannon fire, and buck systems scanned for survivors. The air was soon thick with fire and steel. But this wasn't chaos, it was choreography. Ukraine had drawn a map of Russia's defenses and was playing them like a symphony. The villages of Zelyosk, Tosno, Pakhovsko, and Usmino, names no one had ever heard, became beacons luring Russia's might away from the real target, Primorsk.
The calm before the collapse. In a bunker near Gachna, a young Russian lieutenant reported the last drone in his sector destroyed. "Sector clear," he said. "All targets neutralized." That message climbed the chain of command, straight into the jaws of a trap. Unseen by the radar, a smaller formation, 7 UJ-26 Bober ER drones, was gliding just above the tree line, weaving through the chaos. They were the assassins. Unlike the wooden decoys that had been sacrificed, these were specialized machines, modified for range, carrying extended fuel tanks and 40-kilogram armor-piercing warheads. Escorting them were the Banshee 7 EW drones, their long-range bodies packed not with explosives, but with electronic warfare pods and antennae. Their mission? To blind the enemy, jam the radars, and escort the Bobers to their target, 1,000 kilometers deep inside Russia. Secret Ukrainian launch sites. Flying low over rivers, forests, and valleys, they hugged the terrain, silent shadows following preloaded digital maps. A few fell, crashing into the dark wilderness. Others pressed on. For hours, they flew without a signal, their paths invisible to Russian radar. Then, as dawn crept across the horizon, the first Russian systems awoke, and Ukraine's trap sprang shut. The Big Bird radar prioritized what it thought were the main threats: the 35 decoy drones rushing towards St. Petersburg. Missiles streaked upward, shredding plywood bodies in flashes of light. The Russians cheered. But the real killers, The 7 Bobber ERs had already crossed the border, invisible beneath the radar floor, escorted by their electronic shadows. The first contact. Near Volosovsky, a Panzer CS-1 locked on to a target, a lone Bobber, steady and confident. On the operator's screen, telemetry flickered. Target captured, range steady. He pressed to fire, and the screen turned white.
The Banshee 7, flying nearby, had unleashed a wall of jamming energy so intense it erased the radar's vision. The lock vanished, the cannons fired blindly, and the drone slipped through into the dark. This dance repeated again and again across Leningrad Oblast. By dawn, 33 drones lay shattered in the fields and forests. But for Ukraine, every drone lost was another door opened. And through that door flew the 7 that mattered most. The descent into fire. 4:45 a.m., Primorsk-Omel-Port. Inside the coastal defense shelter, a sudden burst of blips appeared on radar. 7 small dots, closing fast. Panic. Missiles fired. 57 E-6 interceptors arcing upward. Too close. Too low. Too fast.
The drones split mid-flight, 3 diving toward the main pumping station, 4 veering for the tankers at dock. The first boober struck the control building, its thermobaric warhead sucking every molecule of oxygen from the room before detonating in a rolling inferno. The second plunged into the pipeline manifold, shattering the arteries of the port. And then the tankers were hit. The Captain Loeb took the first blow, its bridge obliterated, electronic systems fried, followed by an explosion that tore open a cargo tank, releasing a geyser of burning oil. Moments later, the Sergei Gorshkov was struck twice, once in the engine room, then at the loading manifolds. Both ships were engulfed in fire. The 2 tankers, Kusto and Kailun, each over 110,000 tons, became twin pillars of flame rising over the Baltic coast.
Within 40 seconds, Pumping Station 2 collapsed and Primorsk vanished beneath a cloud of smoke and fire so vast it was visible from orbit. The illusion of victory. By morning, the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed victory. 221 Ukrainian drones destroyed, they announced. All attacks repelled. But satellite images told another story. The port of Primorsk was gone. 2 tankers burned to their keels. Billions of dollars in damage. 20% of Russia's oil export capacity wiped off the map. Each ship had been part of Russia's shadow fleet, used to dodge international sanctions. Each carried 700,000 barrels of oil. In one night, Russia had lost nearly $80 million in revenue per day of halted flow.
The dominoes fall. At Pulkovo Airport in St. Petersburg, chaos spread. 11 aircraft diverted. Civilian and military control systems flooded with ghost signals. Across the region, falling debris from downed drones triggered evacuation sirens. Radar operators stared at screens filled with clutter, real and fake targets indistinguishable. The deception was total. Even as the fires consumed Primorsk, Russian air defenses were still firing at phantoms above the city, the anatomy of a perfect strike. When analysts later dissected the attack, they found 2 classes of UAVs. One, built to deceive. The other, to destroy. The decoys overwhelmed decision systems. The EW platforms like Banshee 7 didn't blind radars completely, they corrupted them, flooding them with false echoes until no one could tell what was real. Captured wreckage around St. Petersburg showed advanced navigation software, proof that these machines hadn't just flown to strike, but to manipulate. Russia's vast defense web, Kronstadt Naval Base, Luga Artillery Line, Pushkin Command Centers, had been trained to look outward. The attack came from within, from the blind angles they'd never guarded. the moment the curtain fell. The official records, the radars had worked, the systems had responded, yet the geometry of war had shifted. Low-altitude drones flying under the radar horizon had outrun even the S-400s. By the time detection came, the targets were already upon them, mere seconds from impact. Primorsk, thought to be one of Russia's most secure ports, was burning because of a flaw in human thinking, not in machinery. The defenders looked outward, but the danger came from beneath, within, and unseen. Aftermath.
By sunrise, the sea was black with oil. The air shimmered with heat and smoke. The port that once funneled $15 billion of annual exports was now a graveyard of steel. Ukraine hadn't just struck a military target. It had struck the foundation of Russia's war economy. 1,000 kilometers of flight, 7 drones, and a plan that rewrote the art of modern warfare. Wars are no longer won by those with the most expensive weapons, but by those who use what they have most intelligently. And that night, Ukraine proved that even a superpower can bleed if you know where to cut.